So yeah, we're just here to chat about the GPHG winners. And you guys will know that the GPHG is literally a competition that anyone can enter if you make watches. And then they have a sort of jury who make the shortlist, and then they pick a jury of 30 people from all over the watch world to decide on the prize winners. And there's a few controversies about the thing as well, but we'll go into them later. But to keep things slightly more exciting, we'll just go on with the slides. So the overall winner this year was this watch. Basically it's called the Ultra Complication Universelle from AP, and it really is quite extraordinary. It's automatic and it has a flying tourbillon. And then it has perpetual calendar and a moon phase. The moon phase is in the little round dot at the between 7 and 8 position. Then it has the sound chiming functions of Sonnier and Grand Sonnier, and it calls itself a Super Sonnier, which only means that they worked out a way to make it more resonant than you might expect. And the Sonnier and Grand Sonnier is quite straightforward in what it does, but it's very hard to achieve in that you can make it chime a certain time. So you can make it chime on the hour every hour, or you can make it chime every quarter hour. And the minute repeater, as you'll know, is quite simple. You press a button and it will sound out the time in minutes. So hours first, then 15s, and then the minutes from 15. And so with all these complications, it has 1,100 parts and was clearly a very impressive watch. So the judges have rewarded it, which is interesting, and it's a bit of a theme of the GPHG Awards in rewarding complications with prizes. That's kind of one of their themes, not just this year, but every year, is to do that. The next watch I thought was interesting was this one, which is not a new watch. So one of the puzzling things about the GPHG is it's not like the Oscars in that the film has to have come out in a set time period. These watches are judged when they're entered to the competition by the watchmaker. So this watch was launched in 2019, but it's still for sale. And it's a jump hour watch. So the hour is told by this ball on the left, and the retrograde minutes on the right tick round. And when you get to the end, it'll jump back. So I thought we'd have to be extremely experimental and put a video in today's talk, because otherwise it wouldn't be anywhere near as fun. So hopefully this will work. I mean, it did just work a few minutes ago. So
It's like a magic 8-ball.
yeah.
It's really cool.
So did you get that all right, or do you want to see it again? No, it's good.
Yep.
Now this is a prize called Horological Revelations, and I'm not entirely clear what's revelatory about this watch. It's just very, very beautiful. It's very interesting. This dial design in gold is engraved. And Simon Brett, who's the watchmaker, designer and maker, asked the engraver that he knew, a lady who wanted to work with on the dial, to come up with an engraving that had never been done before. And this is what she came up with. And that dial is only available on 10 of the watches, the 10 limited watches. And this chap is basically, or this watch is actually all about finishing. So it's simply a time-only chronometer. It has, small seconds in an interesting place, I guess. And its layout and of the movement is interesting and very beautiful. It has a big balance wheel, which helps it be more accurate. Apparently, it came in very easily with the chronograph standards of -4 to +6. And yeah, it is very beautiful. So again, we can sort of talk about what about this is a horological revelation. I'm not sure. The polishing on the screw heads alone takes an hour each screw, just to put it in perspective what this level of hand finishing involves. And interestingly, this watch isn't that expensive in the grand scheme of very expensive hand finished watches, because it's 60,000 Swiss francs. Now, the next one I thought I could highlight, there we go, is called the Chronometry Prize. Now, this really is a technical achievement, because the interesting thing about this is the balance spring is cylindrical. You can see it on the left. So an ordinary balance spring would curl in on itself, and this curls downwards. And it comes from a pocket watch movement design that they wanted to try and replicate. And this is the only one that's been done in a wristwatch. Now, the reviewers that I read about this in preparation sort of were just mildly impressed. And nobody anywhere made any comments on whether this is a good idea or not in terms of accuracy, reliability, and so on. But I think we can agree it's very impressive and it looks great. So again, they're rewarding something adventurous, and not just adventurous technically, but also fantastic looking, because it's a very interesting watch design. Again, we can talk about that a bit later. The men's complication, I think this was slightly controversial, I would say, because it's a prize for someone who doesn't really do complications doing a complication, but he has done them in the past. He's made chronographs before. And I think maybe they're rewarding, again, the elegance of this world timer design. There's a lot of very great world timers in watch world history, and this may enter the classics. And yeah, it's got his trademark screw design in the four corners. It's a cushion case. CSW is cushion, short for cushion shaped world timer. That's the name of the watch, which is pretty cool. Got the classic hands from the brand, the classic Guilloche dial. And I want to show you the movement side, just to show you the Voutilanen and finishing that people know so well. And again, he's got a very big balance wheel to help it retain its accuracy. Now, the ladies' watch prize went to Piaget. So the one on the right, the cuff watch with the cutout and the sapphires. And if you look at the close-up in the top middle picture, that shows you just how incredibly finely detailed this jewelry work is. And then another prize, which was the handcraft prize, went to this Piaget, which is actually in the men's watch range, according to Piaget, even though it's ultra-thin tourbillon. And that was because this dial that you can see in the bottom middle picture is made up of different materials. So there is different handcrafted fine materials to make up those different swirls, including straw, leather, enamel, I think, and a couple of others, and wood veneers. So a really, really interesting watch. Yes, it's covered in diamonds. Yes, it's got a tourbillon in their ultra-thin tourbillon movement. But the choice to, then go that extra mile on the dial is obviously what's been rewarded here. That it's called the Métier d'Art, and it's got a lot of different handcrafts, just even in the dial of one watch. So makes sense why they're applauding that this year. Sports watch, nothing to say. Blindingly obvious why they chose that one. And this one, which is the Petite Aiguille prize, and for a watch between 2,000 and 8,000 Swiss francs. And it was won by Christopher Ward with their Bel Canto chiming watch. And this is a very clever watch because it does one thing to make itself impressive, which is chime the hour on the hour every hour if you turn the chiming on. And they decided to put the mechanism for the chiming on the front of the dial, as you can see on the picture. And this is the light blue version, which is the one I'm expecting to be delivered hopefully in January. So I'm quite excited because it's a very good looking and unique watch. And again, they're very clearly rewarding a watch that is trying something different. It's trying something to be accessible, but it's still complicated. It's still showing off what horology is all about. And this one, in contrast, I think is a very interesting choice because this is a Rattrapante chronograph. It's a monopusher Rattrapante, which means that you start and stop and reset the chronograph with the pusher in the crown on the right-hand side, but you split the 2 times with the square pusher on the left-hand side. And they haven't done much else with it. You've obviously got the dial slightly skeletonized, not completely. The movement's very beautiful. But the reason I think this is slightly interesting and controversial is because there are only 10 of these being made, and they cost 280,000 Swiss francs. And I think it's interesting that of all the chronographs that are made in the world, and having just, really rewarded something that was exciting and very low cost in the Christopher Ward watch, they're doing something that's totally unobtainable. And I think Peterman Badat, which is the independent workshop with 2 watchmakers in who make this and their time-only model, they're now sold out till 2029. So awarding prizes to independent watchmakers who can't produce any more watches is also an interesting choice. So I'll stop there. I've mentioned quite a few things where I think they've made interesting choices. But now let's open it up to anything and everything people are inspired to chat about with that. And I can flick through, and then I can bring up some of the other watches in the web browser if people want to mention them or look at them as well.
For me, the top watch was the Ulysses Nardin Freak. I just think
That was your favorite from all of the selections this year.
And favorite winner. It won the iconic watch. Yeah. There were others sort of within the long list, which I sort of prefer, I think. But I think that just in particular it's a really fun watch that is well priced for how complicated it is, has a genuinely novel way of showing the time, and is I guess groundbreaking, if a watch could ever be groundbreaking. And the more you look at particularly the sort of more modern iteration of the watch, the more both wearable and legible it is.
Mm-hmm.
So the first, it's a great sort of lesson in taking a wacky design and then over time making it more and more engaging for customers and more enjoyable for people to wear.
Yeah. I'm just bringing up a picture. I mean, I love that watch. As you said, it's much more wearable now. It's slightly smaller.
Yeah. And it's very cool what they did, the crown being the whole bezel as the crown to set the time, to wind it. So that's also something cool, different.
Absolutely. And it's if you look at sort of sports watches out there, and if you're spending whatever the number is, £35,000, I think they are, £35,000 on a sports watch. Yeah, for many of the big Swiss brands, you're not really getting anything. You're getting a case with some nice finishing and sort of time only movement. With this, you're getting a flying movement, generally innovative way of telling the time. I just think it's great.
But everything depends on the combination, because the new one which they introduced now, the khaki one on the Dubai Weeks, is 66. Just because it's the carbon material, very light, and this. Okay. So you need to be careful which option you choose because it can change the price significantly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so for those who don't know, the whole escapement is mounted on top of the dial and moves. So it's a tourbillon through a moving carriage with the hours underneath the escape wheel here, and then a separate minute time that moves.
This time they've sort of added an arrow, and you can see it on the GPHG picture just below where your cursor is, or to the left.
Yeah.
You can see the sort of arrows.
Sorry, I got that wrong. Sorry, the tourbillon cage moves around once an hour with the minute. And the hour hand moves underneath that. Yeah. Sorry, I was the wrong way around there.
And then if you look at the original version, so if you just take out the word one from your search, it's equally. And if you scroll down, it's that one there. Yeah.
Yeah.
it's still very pretty, but it's just
It's less wearable.
yeah. Yeah, it's a bit less refined. It's a bit, it's still exactly the same idea, but it's just I don't know what the word is.
Bit unwieldy or something.
Yeah, unwieldy.
On the prize, it's just a bit more. I mean, refined is a strange thing to call a watch called a freak, but
Yeah.
more refined than the first one, I guess.
Yeah,
The bridges which they are made are much slimmer also. So you see the technology here that this movement, the friction to hold it before needed, let's say, stronger bridges, and now it is almost non-existence.
And then
So
they played with it a lot. So that's a silicon escape wheel and
Mhm.
silicon escape. It's a silicon balance, sorry, and a silicon escape wheel underneath. So there's a lot of play gone in to the various freaks over the years. But yeah, ultimately the reason it's iconic is it's so different a design and the adjustment with the bezel, which is truly rare in watchmaking.
the simplest version they do is actually available from goldsmiths for 22,750, and you can get 0% finance on it.
You are tempting.
It is, yeah, if you were to yeah, they'll do it for £500 a month for 4 years. There you go. Tempting.
They are amazing. I haven't had
Yeah.
because Ulysse Maldan aren't distributed in the UK. I mean, they distributed at Watches Switzerland only, as far as I know. So it's not quite as easy. But one of our members did say recently that currently in Broadgate they have an exhibition and they have some of the historic ones there. So I haven't had a chance to pop in yet. I might actually do that tomorrow. But if you're over at Watches Switzerland Broadgate area, you should maybe do that if they're there before Christmas. So yeah, I think my thoughts from the looking through the GPHG in detail is that they really do like trying to reward complication, and they do try and highlight what the industry is doing that's very fancy. So in that sense, an award show, is kind of what you'd hope it does. But did anyone else have any thoughts on what they're trying to do and some of their themes?
I mean, I would agree.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, come on, John.
No worries. I was gonna say there was I'll see if I can share my screen here actually. Oh no worries. There was a Horinki article and like halfway down, there's like a real zoomed in shot of the Simon Brett one. And what I didn't realize is the screws are actually like concave. So they're like bend in slightly.
Yeah, those ones.
Which I'd never seen before. So they're like, I think it's called black polishing, which again, something I've only learned about recently. So it's like really dark mirror finish, but if you can sort of see it in the picture, but like it's almost like a sort of like a dish, like a bowl shape.
Yeah.
Really unusual. So I imagine like even the machine and tooling that would be used, even just the service these watches must be fairly unique. Like you're not taking like no one's taking this to a local watchmaker anyway, but like yeah, I can imagine it's like every step of the way is quite a task on something like this.
Yeah, I mean, so the finishing is the point, yeah. And so he's done that to the screws. And as I said, he said each one took an hour. But if you'll also look at these wheels, he's actually finished not just the top of the wheel, but he's finished the edge of the teeth, right? Around here.
And that's a different kind of wheel to most. I think it's called a wolf spoke.
Yeah.
And yeah, so John, to your point about the black polishing, it's in Japanese you call it zaratsu, and just to sort of show you the difference in price, it's what Grand Seiko do on a lot of their polishing, on the entirety of many of their cases. And one of the reasons why people love Grand Seiko, if they're in the know, is that it's a lot of watchmaking for the money. And sure, they're not finishing all these tiny little components with that finishing, but they are finishing the case or the lugs or the dial with it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, I mean, that's the hidden cost with owning any of these independent watches is, sure, it costs you £60,000 to buy it, but it probably costs you £6,000 to have it serviced, and it's more likely to need regular servicing than many of these mass market models, because the movements aren't tried and tested a million times over. They're tried and tested 5 times over.
It's a bit also like kind of with vintage watch approach. You need to be delicate. Take for a walk maybe once per week, not for every day.
Yeah.
I mean, I had dinner with someone on Saturday who was told by a watch store salesman that he wasn't supposed to wear his automatic Oris every day, which I was like, that's not correct. Oris would expect you to wear it every day. Simon Brett, maybe not. But I was discussing this at length with someone at an event recently, and they said, "Oh, the buyers of this kind of horology don't expect it to last that long," and I think that's kind of unfair. I think if you're going to make a chronometer this carefully, it should be really reliable. But maybe I'm in the wrong there. I think it's absolutely fabulous looking watch.
I would absolutely have one.
The dial after the limited set, the dial on the Open series is slightly different. It's still yellow gold, but it's more of a it looks like sort of brushed ice rather than this sort of scaly look. And there's a few really clever things, like this is sapphire chapter ring for the minutes, and then it goes back to white gold or I can't remember, platinum for the numbers. So that's pretty cool. And the big hand lines up perfectly with the screws. So the big window in the hour hand lines up perfectly with the 3 screws, which is very clever. He's done a huge bridge like Voutilainen does. The other, I think another theme is the, oh, there we go. The other theme I think is bridges.
Yeah, it's almost high-end watchmaking for the sake of high-end watchmaking.
Oh yeah, I mean it isn't. Yes, it is that. I mean, look at those bridges.
Yeah.
But if you produce 10 of them, you know that you will find the crowd, let's say, for it. The same enthusiast we just will want for sake of the watchmaking. So you can allow yourself.
I think that's what almost makes the Bel Canto so impressive, is that feels like more of a gamble in that is well, I guess you could call it a mass market watch, in that they're producing significantly more of those than any of these independents would be producing. But massive gamble. They don't even have the logo on the dial, which was always what people gave Christopher Ward a bit of stick for, was the logo changing as much as it had. But it's almost like they were just letting the complication speak for itself and sort of see what happened. And I was delighted it was so well received by the public. And the fact that you've got one on order, Hamish, I think you do as well.
Yeah, I'm waiting. I should have get before Hamish. Hopefully.
But even that says loads, that multiple people in a watch collectors club were like, okay, yeah, I want one of these. I don't think there's any better endorsement than that, really. Getting collectors to genuinely part with money on a pre-order. And we all talk about wait lists. It's a wait list in a way, I guess.
Yeah. There's a 1-year wait list, not because just pushed, but because of the production, but it is. But yes, as you are saying, I mean, they have in the mind to do kind of mass production that to be available to anyone almost, as we can see with the price. And it's also really cool that it was awarded, because it's like opening the doors. Swiss are not very welcoming, so it's nice that to see British watchmaker be also appreciated.
You're right, but it was the only, otherwwise outside of that one. Well, in that category there was Christopher Ward and there was Studio Underdog, but I think literally every other watch was Swiss, and there are plenty of other countries that make great watches. For me, this set of awards was kind of more Swiss and more traditional watchmaking than any of the other ones previously. And sure, Christopher Ward won a prize, but Christopher Ward won a prize with a watch that is far more complicated than they're ever going to make again, or at least make for a very long time. And all of the sort of all I guess the sort of standard, more accessible models that could have won prizes throughout the competition didn't. It kept going to these incredibly exclusive, really nerdy watches, and maybe that's the point. But
I always had a feeling that they are very close in this way. That is, I don't know. I don't have such strong comparison if it is this one is more Swiss. For me, they are always quite Swiss.
Yeah.
And well, like we can imagine, like Hamish is saying, yes, there is a lot of complications, but we have a Tudor, which completely does not fit all others. Let's say in terms of thematic of complication or something. And let's be honest. Really, we couldn't sport watch is so wide that we couldn't. Yes, it's a really great watch, but as we are looking for any independence or anything, couldn't we get to something different?
Yeah.
Well, they picked the most commercial watch in the whole of the long list, right? The short.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think
the only thing about the Pelagos 39, I went to try one on and it nearly became a very expensive visit to tutor. But the only problem with it is I've already got it's made of titanium, but I already sort of have my like stainless black dial sports watch. And it fits that so well and ticks so many boxes that I would need to probably let go of something if I wanted to get one. I almost thought like, oh, if only I had waited a couple of years. So I think maybe if it comes out in another color, I could justify it. But interesting what you were saying there about the independents who barely make anything. Like, will this go into the hands of someone? One thing I found, like Richard Bank, the Studio Underdog guy, a little off topic here. It's probably on other social channels. He's posted to say that anyone that he's found who has a pre-order for the new watch that he's brought out, that it already has it listed for sale. He's cancelled their orders.
Yeah, he did this already a few times. Now recently also
it's news to me.
Bamford with seconded what they did. They also canceled 5 of them watches suddenly and came for charity as the sale because people want flipper or they are flippers, but more and more. So they did it a few times already. It's good because then really somebody gets the watch who really wants it and pays the price which it should not.
Yeah, because I almost wonder if there's 10 of these pieces, I wonder who those 10 people are.
Yeah.
And like who buys these or how that's selected.
I mean, it's in one of them, I can't remember whether in Simon Brett's case, no, in Peterman Badat's case, or Simon Brett, their first watch was a subscription. So they said, "Oh, I need the cash up front," and I haven't even finished designing it yet. I think it was the first.
It was
one of the two, and then after, sorry,
it was the Simon Brett one.
Yeah. So, where's it going? Yeah. So again, this idea of that the industry is currently strong enough, and there are enough high-end collectors who want to buy independent watches that 10 or 20 people are going to pony up basically probably 50 grand in advance so that the watchmaker can get the workshop he needs to produce the quality of watch that he or she, because there are a few women who've done it, want to produce. It's very, it shows how many people are out there and how many people want the first from someone who may go on to be a legend. And I guess that's another reason why they want to award prizes to people like this, is because the industry as a whole benefits from the more people who take that risk and the more collectors who benefit from or see the benefit of taking those risks on those watches. Because ultimately is anyone surprised that Audemars Piguet can make a watch with that many complications in and sell a few? Because they won't sell many, but they'll sell a few.
I was surprised it was an 1159 though, which is a good thing for the 1159 because they often get slated for being the Royal Oak company, which is no bad thing. It's a great watch, the Royal Oak, but it sort of like plants the flag a little bit more. Because again, it doesn't seem to get as much love as the Royal Oak, but for this to get the prize says to me that like, oh, okay, hopefully this trickles down a little into that model family, and not necessarily every complication on this watch, but if there's more attention on this as a result, maybe it means we're going to see a little more in that model family, I guess.
Well, we've already had the Star Wheel come back in it.
Yeah.
And that didn't win last year or the year before. So again, you're right. I think they might be saying, let's show that we want to recognize the big guns when they do something more daring and as they're trying to build out their model range. And AP insists that the 1159 has been a great success. So, what does that mean? We don't know because it's a private company, so we don't know anything about their numbers. But when you go and see it, it's a good watch. It's just a very expensive watch. And so, in a way, putting super complications into it makes sense as well, because it then makes sense the price.
I'm quite interested to see the smaller version now. They introduced the 39 millimeters, not the 42, because is a really nice watch, but 42 is quite big.
Yeah.
For many wrists. So let's see, maybe this will help. Yeah, it would be nice to see, because I mean, Royal Oak will be forever, let's say, I think iconic, and it will be people will recognize the IP first from Royal Oak, but it wouldn't be bad that they come back and be recognized and have bigger variety, let's say. For these consumers which want to buy the Royal Oak first, let's buy these 5 1159s, and then you can get to the list, yeah.
Right, because they're vintage. Is it Cantien? It's like the perpetual calendars they used to make. They look incredible. So this to me is almost like, oh, maybe we can bring back a little bit of that. Like circular faced Audemars Piguet models can also be just as like desirable.
And let's not get away from the fact that with this design, not the skeletonized versions, but it's the sportiest, probably one of the sportiest looking chronographs they've made for a while, because the Royal Oak chronographs are very distinct, and so it's again, how, as you said, have a circular chronograph that ties into that market. I also think it's interesting that this won the grand prize, and last year was the sequential Evo. So I think it's also clear that they want to give the juries are wanting to give the grand prize to something that's truly special, which again is fine. If you gave it to someone's next dress watch, people are going to be slightly puzzled, I think, now, but that relies on people making truly special watches year after year. So
I really like this. I would, if I had whatever crazy amount of money it costs to buy all these, I would almost certainly want
one. Well, there was the skeleton one on Chrono 24 for 280, I think. So they're not as much as some. Like the Patek super complications are more than that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was none of the winners this time seemed like utterly jaw-dropping, apart from, was it the Oatlands? Yeah, I thought that, that I think that is genuinely bonkers and super exciting, and I'm going to have a look on Chrono 24 and see if there's any available.
Well, they've not sold. So the thing about this is they're only making 25 of this version, and there's another one which has kind of got a yellow gold dial, and they haven't sold them all of their own in 4 years.
Okay, fine.
So I think what's interesting about watches like this is the market for these is very small.
Yeah.
Which you can understand given its size. Let's see if the video plays for us again.
Oh, you're right, yeah. Still in stock.
So can you hear the sound on the video?
No.
Nope.
Okay, that's good. The sound's not great. Scripting.
It's very cool that the jumping hour itself is not to the closest possible. It really rotates quite strongly there.
Mm.
Yeah, so I think that's very cool.
Yeah.
And they
And
well,
it is owned by the same as what's the Moser watches, yeah? They are doing the
yeah.
Are they?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the name is simply an anagram of Neuchâtel. That's where
Mm.
that's where Hortlands comes from, which is quite daft.
No way.
Hmm.
That's
And
very cool.
yeah, I mean those sorts of watches that are truly crazy. I mean, there's a lot of them being made in small numbers by different people, and I find it them the hardest thing to understand that they find buyers. Because stuff like this, beautiful, time only, fairly reasonably priced given the handcraftedness,
Yeah.
and stuff like the MB&F, like really distinct, or De Bethune, where they have a really distinct design language. I can see that being collectible and people wanting to collect them all. A lot of the watches from the same firm, but stuff like the Hortlands, different Hortlands watches and things of that type in the watch world, I find it really hard to, Vianney Halter's watches, they're just so out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sort of makes me think of do you ever see photos from things like the Met Gala when someone shows up like a really over the top outfit? And I always think, well, you're probably not going to wear that twice. So it almost seems crazy to have something so specific and that much money on it. But then I guess you could go the other way. You could get something like an MB&F and like wear it everywhere. I think Cameron, funny, when we were at the IWC event, we were walking out of somewhere and he'd noticed MB&F on the wall. And his reaction was hilarious. He was like, I never realized they were here. I absolutely have to call in next time. And again, I was like, oh, so you're the guy. You're the person that wants one of these. But it's just funny because it just wasn't my taste. But at the same time, it was like it just felt like almost like an ornament on the wrist in the way that like I would love a JLC Atmos clock. Like I think that makes sense to me. But the idea of that on your wrist, for some reason, there's like this mental hurdle that I just haven't got over yet, I suppose.
It's really funny when you see people actually wearing the M&F watches because they're so showy. There's no way you can do anything other than point at it and go, "Oh my God, what's that?" Even if you don't like or understand anything about watches, it's a real sort of showy piece. And so you find my entire experience of the three people I've met that wear MB&F watches they love to talk about their MB&F watches and they never wear long sleeves. They like are always sort of waving them around in people's faces because it's a very it's like a real showman watch, both in cost and execution.
The hardest part for me would be if you had like a 10-year-old family member, that would be the one that they would want to play with.
Yeah.
And it would be equally, it would be the last one you would allow them to play with because of how delicate it probably would be.
There are so many great little independents now, and looking at Hamish, to your point, how it is surprising that there are buyers for these wacky, not unwearable, but large and odd-looking pieces of art that cost 70 or £100,000 that people wear on their wrists and can easily break or have stolen. You see it with Urwerk, the other Swiss brand that do crazy ways of telling time, and then HYT is the other one. But people do buy them, and it's I don't know if it's just the desire to have something that is so different and so unique and so impressive, or what.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to this thing that Ed and I talk about a lot, is that there are a lot of watch collectors out there.
Yeah.
Like there really are. And
Mm.
what is a shame is that they don't meet up more often, which is why we're trying to do what we're trying to do with the club. But there are a lot of people who collect expensive watches, and they'll buy, quite a few each year.
Mm.
And they don't mind picking up some of these more crazy things just to have some crazy stuff in their collection, in the same way that we might buy a G-Shock.
Mm-hmm.
Or a micro brand. They would just buy a small Swiss brand, even though it's tens of thousands of Swiss francs. And I think that happens quite a lot. And yeah, that's just part of the market that exists, and that explains all these watches. Like, I mean, we saw the Cyrus watches at the Watch Pro, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're really expensive, and they're very particular.
Yeah. I think they're cool though. I don't know. I don't know if you'd get bored of watches like that.
Well, that's the thing, because at the Watch Pro salon, like I looked at the Zodiac stand,
Yeah.
and they had so many, like the laser tag one. Well, even the strap and everything lights up. There's one Pineapple Dream, which I was quite drawn to, that like a little pineapple counterbalance on the second hand. There's like gradient sort of sunray from like yellow to green color. And it was funny because I was like, my thought was, well, if I'm going to go for something that loud and that out there, I probably don't want it to be like all the budget sort of thing. Whereas like they're sort of the antithesis of that. It's like, yeah, like you say, I can only imagine that the collector that buys that probably goes in with the same mentality. They're like, oh, well, I probably wouldn't spend like the money that I would spend in an auction for like a Paul Newman Daytona on this, but I probably can afford, say, 60,000 Swiss francs or something on it.
I don't know if you know the band Trivium, the metal band. Their lead singer wears Cyrus watches.
Oh.
Which when you see him, it's a very odd combination, but I guess it sort of makes sense. Wacky designs, bold, bit different. He thinks of himself as a bit of an intellectual. I mean, some of their watches are well priced. £6,000-7,000.
Yeah,
But I would say,
we saw the really big ones.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's true.
but I would say also from the other side, like, because we are talking if they get bored. But let's look now on the market. I mean, almost every small brand do some kind of diver. Almost all are looking the same. And we are almost every day thinking that we'll be over this trend and it will come something different, but it's not. It's still, you have more people coming suddenly seeing, and that's I haven't seen, is different or something. So I think it's the same. It's maybe smaller pot of people interested in this kind of watches, but because they are interested, it stays with them because they notice some differences. I mean, you have people which notice the Rolex smaller size, and suddenly they see on a picture everything already, the differences with the teaser before even trailer or anything movie. Yeah. So I think there is similar attention to details. It's just with different, let's say, framework of different watches, and maybe different pot of people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a good point, actually, because now that I think about it, you don't see an awful lot of divers at the events that I've been to anyway. Like it tends to be a lot of either like time-only dress watches, like chronographs I see an awful lot of. But just like bezel, diver, stainless steel. Maybe we're all like subconsciously thinking like, oh, like we know that that's popular with everybody. We know every brand has one. So, and even myself, like there, I just talked about like, oh, when I thought about a diver that I might get, it was bright green and yellow and had a pineapple on the dial. Like it wasn't the Pelagos 39, even though my brain says that makes sense as a like I could buy that and it would probably not be out of place anywhere. It would last forever. Um, so yeah, I wonder will I come full circle and then get like a black no date sub and be done with it.
That's the joke about Rolex, isn't it? Most collectors start with Rolex and then end with Rolex in their life of collecting. And yeah, and almost everyone ends up wanting a black sub at some point. Not me yet, though. But
Me neither.
I think I would get one and I would change the bezel constantly. I would be that guy who like puts an aftermarket one on every other day.
Then maybe then out of the order is for you. It's colorful. You for sure they can produce you the exchange bezels.
It was a great name, but or sorry, terrible name, great idea. I just thought like the idea of out of order being on the front of the watch, I was like, oh, I'm not sure about that. Seemed a bit odd. I suddenly didn't. I felt like, oh, I feel like all the hatred that the Christopher Ward name got was really unjustified at that point.
So, do we think the award show is a valuable thing?
I think it depends who you are. I think women's watches weren't terribly well represented for one. And when they were, it's still that lots of gem setting, like crazy bracelet sort of thing going on. But if you were a very horology independent or Christopher Ward, I think you've done very well. Whereas I think for a brand like Tudor, it's just like, oh, another one. Almost like Lewis Hamilton winning a World Drivers' Championship. It's like, well, it's great, but like I've got another 6 of these. It's fine.
Do you think if Rolex entered, they'd win 3?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think coming back to the first one, I think that is the same. The question is marketing working? Because this is the same as advertising or the same, let's say, people are the audience. It's not for us too much because we are not affected by that too much because we anyway do our own research, check our own information and know what we are looking for. And maybe even we already saw all these watches. So maybe it could be interesting, the nomination for us if we haven't seen something. But there are for sure people, and I think, for example, for Christopher Ward, it will be big thing, for example, to help them to grow in USA, because I think US now will start more following these trends. So that's for them, let's say, free advertisement. And not free, I mean, they put a lot of effort into watch, but kind of help in advertising.
Yeah, because I think is to that point on marketing, you couldn't go anywhere without hearing about the Tissot PRX or the Swatch Moon Swatch Omega collaboration. And like they're completely absent from things like this. But if you think about like what got everybody talking over the last couple of years, as far as the watch world went, and people outside of watches, I mean, I remember watching a video where somebody said the Tissot PRX is like the Cartier love bracelet for men. At this point, it's almost ubiquitous, and it's like I mean, I'm getting married next year, and I was like, oh, like I might save a couple of those secondhand and like give those to the groomsmen, sort of thing. Like it's that kind of watch. Whereas, yeah, I'm like they're very curiously absent from all of this. So I don't know. Maybe they don't enter.
I mean, Swatch Group don't enter. Most Richemont don't enter, and Rolex don't enter.
Is that because they wouldn't want to lose?
Tech don't enter.
Or come second?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's a shame, isn't it?
but like that's what I think is interesting is the brand that the award show has continued to grow and develop itself, and it appears to be quite fair. Although obviously people are pointing out that the Louis Vuitton tambour getting into this show without having been on anyone's wrists and being the icon award with the new watch. So rather than, even though there has been a tambour for a while, they didn't put one of the old watches in to say it's an icon. They shortlisted the new one, and everybody raised their eyebrows at that. But I think it would be better off if everybody entered. I think then there'd be more pressure on the jury.
Yeah.
And you don't get paid, but you do get your free week in Geneva. And do change the members quite a few of the members each year. So I think the process seems very sound. Because if you look at the jury, they are from all different parts of the watch world, like they really are. And they just go and they have a week, and then they vote in secret. So the jury doesn't know the winners. Which is also very, very good. So I think,
Yeah, then
if you're going to have an award show, you should do it fairly. It sounds like their process is fair. The question is, why doesn't everyone enter? And the reason everyone doesn't enter is because they don't want to be seen compete. They don't want their own brands competing against each other, which is maybe reasonable. And because there's a lot of brands are so pompous about their own history and importance. So if they entered and didn't win for 10 years, they're going to get very upset.
Yeah.
I think it could be better working if there was that the watches, so for some periods, not exactly maybe a year, calendar year, but from before the show, that all new are competing. They are split before different nomination, not that watchmaker nominate themselves, because then exactly it will be enforced that everybody is coming, and we can really judge how was the year from watchmaking point of view. Since we are saying the process is quite fair, so this could work.
Well, yeah, but there's no economic incentive then, is there? So, all award shows in all industries are a business, revenue-raising business.
Yeah, of course.
So, and you think it's 500 Swiss francs to put your watch in for this. I guess the other goal of awarding the prizes is to encourage more people to enter. So the Christopher Ward win and the Studio Underdog shortlisting. Shortlisting the Studio Underdog watermelon in the under 2,000 Swiss francs category will surely not do anything other than to encourage almost every micro brand with any money to apply.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my first thought was Mr. Jones.
Yeah.
Where are they?
Can you imagine? You'd have to do it behind Crispin's back. You'd have to sneak it over, and then they'd withdraw it the minute they found out.
That'd be so great, though.
That's one thing I noticed actually.
Right, John, you can go to the next event. You can tell him that you want him to enter and see what he says.
I think he'd have to hound me out of the shop.
He'd want nothing to do with them, I don't think. He's happy with his quiet life.
I think he begrudges even having to sell them. I think he'd rather just make one, put it in the Tate, and be done with it.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Maybe. But yeah, and again, you'd be really interested to see what they said, because if he did one of his much more exotic designs and put in the automatic movement, that's Swiss. They are Swiss. And they'd have to consider it really in a couple of the categories. And they should, because he spent a long time creating the ability in his firm to make incredible designs that no one else can do, which is what the prizes are all about, really. That's what a lot of these prizes are about.
Yeah.
Okay, well, coming up to the end of the hour, anyone got anything else they want to comment on the GPHG before we knock it on the head? We'll do another one of these for Only Watch, because Only Watch got postponed in huge amount of controversy. So I think they've now said it's next May. So we do an online event.
I think there are even doubts that it is not really cancelled, because if it is let's say postponed almost, first was without the date, now are some mentioning, so we'll see.
Well, yeah, and usually it's in the same week, so that it's much more convenient for everyone. So I'm guessing they're going to have to do it the week after Watches and Wonders to make it convenient for everyone next year. So that does set a date on it. And we'll see. But yeah, we can definitely talk about that because those watches are crazy, and we can talk about all the controversy as well if we do an evening on that.
It was a real shame to see the Baltic go to sale.
Sorry?
Baltic. It was a real shame
Yeah.
to see the Baltic Perpetual Calendar miss out on the sale, just because I thought that was such a fantastic watch. So I hope it does go ahead and they do auction it off next year.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll see. Okay. Well, if no, has anyone got anything else they want to say on the awards? No. Good. All right. Well, let's finish up there. Thanks again for everyone. It's good fun and always lots to talk about. December we're doing the quiz, so I think I've put the date in for that. I think it's the 20th again. It's definitely it's the Monday before the Christmas weekend. So yeah, we'll do the quiz, which Ed is going to host this time. So my challenge is to beat his score from last year, whatever that was. Can't remember. So yeah, sign up for the quiz if you're interested, and otherwise I'll see you all on Thursday.